I don't know if this message will ever reach anyone, or if the void will swallow it whole like it does everything else. But if you're hearing this, know that I didn't mean to find the Soulforge. I didn't mean for any of this. The story begins in the ecliptic belt, a no-man's land on the edge of charted space. It's where desperate scavengers, outlaw miners, and rogue AI fleets drift in a dance of death and greed. I was one of them, once, before everything went to hell. My name's Valen Kiris, and I was a salvager. Not the glamorous kind that digs up alien artifacts for museums, but the gritty kind who rummages through derelict ships and forgotten colonies for anything that'll sell. We were deep in the belt when it happened, me and my partner, Jorah. She was the brains of our operation, the one with the tech expertise. I was the muscle, the idiot who pried open sealed airlocks and hauled out loot. The job seemed simple: investigate a long-dead freighter, the Eon Wraith, which had been lost for decades. The ship had a reputation, of course, cursed, the whispers said, but to us, curses were just tall tales to keep cowards away from salvage worth a fortune. The Eon Wraith was a black silhouette against the distant glow of a dying star, its bulk scarred and pockmarked by asteroid impacts. It shouldn't have been drifting, though, not in the void. The gravitational currents here were like quicksand, dragging everything into the maw of the Black Shard, a singularity so massive it defied known physics. Jorah scanned it from the cockpit of our ship, the Driftseer. No energy signatures, no heat sources. It's dead, Valen. Good, I said, strapping on my EVA suit. Dead ships are easier to loot. She shot me a look, the kind that said, "You're going to get us killed one day." We docked at the Eon Wraith's airlock, the magnetic clamps of the Driftseer holding tight against its hull. As I stepped through the umbilical tether and onto the derelict, my boots clanged against the metal floor, the sound swallowed by the oppressive silence. Jorah followed, her scanner clutched tight. "This place gives me the creeps," she muttered, her voice crackling through our comms. The interior was a tomb. Bulkheads buckled under some immense pressure, walls scorched black in places. Whatever had happened here, it wasn't mechanical failure. The bridge was our first stop. We needed the ship's logs to understand what we were dealing with. But as we moved deeper, the Eon Wraith began to feel wrong. It wasn't just the eerie quiet or the flickering emergency lights that seemed to pulse like a dying heartbeat. It was something heavier, like the ship itself was watching us. "I've got movement," Jorah said, her voice tense. I froze, gripping the handle of my plasma cutter. "Movement? What kind?" She frowned at her scanner. "It's faint. Could be residual energy spikes. Or what?" She didn't answer, but her face told me everything. We reached the bridge, and Jorah hacked into the terminal. The logs were fragmented, corrupted by time or something worse, but the bits she recovered were enough to make my blood run cold. Captain's log, day 453. The artifact is alive. I swear it moved. The crew doesn't believe me, but I've sealed the cargo hold. No one goes in. Not even me. Day 460. Voices. Whispers in the dark. I don't sleep anymore. They're in my head. They're in my blood. The artifact once. The log ended abruptly. "Artifact," I said, my throat dry. Jorah didn't respond. She was staring at the scanner again, her eyes wide. "Valen, that movement? It's getting closer." A metallic screech echoed down the corridor, faint but unmistakable. My grip on the plasma cutter tightened as my heart slammed against my ribs. "Stay calm," I said, more to myself than to her. We left the bridge, moving quickly but cautiously toward the cargo hold. If the artifact was here, and still intact, it could be worth more than we'd ever dreamed. But as we approached, the ship seemed to come alive. The walls groaned, the floor vibrating under our boots. And the whispers, they started as faint murmurs, indistinct and far away, but they grew louder with every step. "Do you hear that?" Jorah whispered. I nodded, my pulse pounding. It was like 1,000 voices speaking at once, overlapping in an endless cacophony of madness. The cargo hold doors were sealed, but the lock was ancient. Jorah worked fast, bypassing it with trembling hands. When the doors hissed open, a wave of cold air rushed out, stinging my face even through the helmet. Inside was darkness, a vast, suffocating void broken only by the faint, pulsating glow of something in the center of the room. The artifact. It was a twisted, organic mass of metal and light, like molten glass frozen mid-flow. Glyphs that hurt to look at spiraled across its surface, shifting and rearranging themselves as if alive. "Valen, I don't like this," Jorah said, her voice barely a whisper. "Neither do I admitted. But we couldn't leave empty-handed." As I approached, the whispers grew deafening, words forming from the chaos. "Touch it. Free us. Bind us. Become whole." My hand twitched involuntarily toward the artifact, and I had to force myself to stop. It was like gravity, pulling me in, promising something I couldn't name but desperately wanted. "Valen, we need to go," Jorah said, her voice panicked. Now. But it was too late. The artifact flared, blinding light flooding the hold. The whispers became screams, and the ship, no, the void itself, seemed to collapse around us. The next thing I knew, I was falling into nothingness, into the void. And when I woke, I was no longer on the Eon Wraith. When I woke up, the first thing I noticed was the silence. Not the kind you get when sound fades, but the kind that presses on your ears, making you feel like the world itself has gone mute. I opened my eyes to an endless black expanse, punctuated by faint, sickly green veins of light streaking through the darkness like cracks in a vast glass dome. There was no horizon, no stars, just the infinite void. My helmet HUD flickered erratically, showing no oxygen levels, no life support readings, nothing. "Jorah," I croaked, but my voice didn't carry. It was swallowed by the silence. I pushed myself up, or at least, I tried to. The ground beneath me wasn't solid in the conventional sense. It felt like standing on gelatinous ice, the surface warping slightly under my weight but never breaking. I looked around frantically, hoping to see Jorah, the drift seer, or anything remotely familiar. That's when I saw it. Far in the distance, a faint light pulsed, red and malevolent, like a heartbeat. It drew my attention immediately, and with it came the whispers. "Come closer. You've already begun." The voice wasn't external, it was inside my head, scratching at my thoughts like claws against glass. "Who's there?" I demanded, my voice hoarse. No response came, just the pull of that crimson light. It wasn't just calling me, it was pulling me. Against my better judgment, I started walking. Every step felt like wading through molasses, the ground sucking at my boots. The whispers grew louder, forming fragmented words and phrases. "The Soulforge awaits. The bindings must hold. The cost, your cost." The words made no sense, but they filled me with a primal unease. After what felt like hours, or maybe seconds, time had lost all meaning, I reached the source of the light. And there it was. The Soulforge. It towered over me, a monolithic structure of impossible geometry, its surface a mass of writhing, interlocking mechanisms and glowing red veins. It wasn't a machine, though, it was alive. I could feel its presence, an ancient, insidious intelligence probing at my thoughts like icy tendrils. As I approached, the whispers crescendoed into a deafening roar. I collapsed to my knees, clutching my head as a vision exploded in my mind. I saw civilizations rise and fall, their histories erased by the Soulforge. I saw creatures dragged into the void, their forms twisted and broken, their essence consumed. And then I saw myself, a figure standing at the edge of the void, bathed in red light, my face twisted in agony as the forge tore me apart. "No!" I screamed, forcing the vision away. I scrambled backward, desperate to put distance between myself and the forge. But the void had other plans. The ground beneath me rippled and stretched, and I fell again, this time into a cavernous chamber, impossibly vast and filled with things. They weren't human, but they weren't entirely alien, either. Twisted amalgamations of flesh, metal, and energy, their forms constantly shifting as though they couldn't decide what to be. They moved in jerky, unnatural patterns, and their eyes, if they had eyes, burned with the same red light as the forge. They saw me. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. One of them, a towering, insectoid creature with spindly limbs and a maw lined with glistening teeth, let out a sound that was somewhere between a roar and a scream. The others turned toward me, their movements accelerating, their shapes becoming more defined. "Run!" The word screamed in my mind, and I obeyed. I bolted through the chamber, the creatures in pursuit. The ground shifted and warped beneath me, throwing me off balance, but I kept running. The whispers were back, louder than ever, mocking and taunting me. "You can't escape. You're already part of it." I didn't care. All I knew was that I had to get away. Ahead, I saw an opening, a jagged tear in the fabric of the void, leaking green light. I didn't know where it led, but it was better than staying here. I dove through it, the air, or whatever passed for air here, screaming around me. I hit the ground hard, the impact jarring every bone in my body. When I looked up, I realized I was in another part of the void. This place was different, though. It was a maze of towering spires and bridges, their surfaces covered in the same glyphs I'd seen on the artifact aboard the Eon Wraith. The whispers were quieter here, but they hadn't disappeared. They were more focused now, their words clearer. The bindings weaken. The forge hungers. You must choose. Choose what? I shouted, my voice echoing through the spires. But no answer came. Instead, the creatures from before emerged from the tear, their forms twisted further by the transition. They didn't hesitate, they came for me with relentless, animalistic ferocity. I ran again, weaving through the labyrinth of spires. The structures seemed to shift as I moved, closing off paths and opening new ones. It felt like the void itself was playing with me, guiding me towards something I didn't want to find. Finally, I reached a dead end, a massive, circular platform with no exits. The creatures were closing in, their snarls and screeches echoing around me. And then, the forge spoke. Not in whispers, but in a voice that shook the very fabric of the void. "You are the key. You are the lock. Enter, and be remade." The platform beneath me shifted, revealing a chasm of seething red light. The creatures hesitated, as if afraid of what lay below. I wasn't given a choice. The ground collapsed, and I fell into the light. The fall didn't feel like a fall. The red light consumed me, yet I never hit a bottom. Instead, it felt like the void unraveled around me, pulling me apart molecule by molecule, thought by thought. My memories began flashing before my eyes, snippets of childhood, the academy, my first assignment on the Eon Wraith. Each fragment lingered for only a second before it was shredded and dissolved into the red haze. I tried to scream, but my voice didn't work. I wasn't even sure if I still had a body. I was falling into something deeper than the void, something older, darker, and infinitely more dangerous. And then I landed. Not gently. The impact jarred every nerve in my body, leaving me sprawled on a surface that pulsed like a living heart. I gasped, sucking in air, or whatever passed for it here. My limbs were shaking, my vision blurred, but I was alive. Above me loomed the forge. This time, there was no distance between us. I was at its very core. It stretched endlessly in every direction, its massive, writhing surface a tapestry of alien symbols, shifting mechanisms, and living flesh. The red veins glowed brighter now, pulsating in rhythm with the beating beneath me. "You are here. The lock is open. The cost must be paid." The voice thundered in my mind, and I clutched my head, trying to block it out. "I don't understand," I yelled. "What do you want from me?" A section of the forge shifted, forming what could only be described as a doorway. Beyond it, a path of jagged obsidian led into the depths of the structure. I didn't want to go in. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but there was nowhere to run to. The void was all around me, infinite and inescapable. The whispers returned, softer now but insidious. "You are chosen. You are the forge's will." I stepped forward, and the doorway sealed behind me. The path descended into darkness, lit only by the faint red glow of the veins running along the walls. The air, or whatever was here, grew thicker, heavier, as if the void itself was pressing down on me. I moved cautiously, every step echoing like a drumbeat. The deeper I went, the more I began to notice them. Figures moved in the shadows, humanoid shapes, distorted and flickering like holograms with failing projectors. They whispered to each other in languages I couldn't understand, their voices blending into a chorus of despair. Some turned to look at me, their faces twisted in anguish, their eyes hollow and glowing faintly red. "Who are you?" I asked, my voice trembling. One of the figures stepped forward. It was human, or had been. Its body was warped, its skin fused with metal plates and cables that pulsed with crimson light. Its face was a mask of pain, its mouth opening and closing as if trying to speak. "You're trapped here, aren't you?" I whispered. The figure nodded slowly, and the whispers around me grew louder. "They are the Forge's price. Souls bound to fuel its hunger." "No," I said, shaking my head. "This isn't real. This can't be real." But it was real. The whispers, the figures, the suffocating presence of the Forge, it was all too vivid to be a nightmare. The path ended in a cavernous chamber, its center dominated by a massive, pulsing core. The core was alive, its surface writhing with the same alien mechanisms and symbols that covered the Forge. Tendrils of red light stretched from it, connecting to the walls, the floor, and the shadowy figures that filled the room. The moment I stepped into the chamber, the core reacted. The light grew brighter, and the whispers became a deafening roar. The figures around me collapsed, their bodies dissolving into streams of energy that flowed into the core. I fell to my knees, overwhelmed by the sheer force of it. My mind was bombarded with images, visions of countless worlds consumed by the Forge, their inhabitants reduced to nothing more than fuel. I saw empires rise and fall, their histories erased as the Forge devoured everything they were. And then I saw myself. I was standing in the heart of the Forge, my body twisted and broken, my soul bound to its will. I was no longer human, I was a part of the machine, an extension of its hunger. "No!" I screamed, fighting against the vision. "You are the key. You are the lock. You cannot escape." The core's tendrils lashed out, wrapping around me. I struggled, but they were too strong. They lifted me into the air, pulling me toward the core. My body burned as the tendrils burrowed into my skin, connecting me to the Forge. In that moment, I felt everything. I felt the Forge's hunger, its insatiable need to consume and destroy. I felt the souls it had taken, their despair and torment echoing through me. And I felt the truth. The Forge wasn't just a machine. It was a living thing, a cosmic parasite that thrived on the essence of those it captured. I fought with everything I had, pulling against the tendrils, screaming in defiance. "You won't take me." The core hesitated, as if surprised by my resistance. "Your will, strong. The cost must be paid." The tendrils tightened, and I felt my strength fading. My mind began to fracture, the line between myself and the Forge blurring. But then, in the depths of the void, I saw it, a glimmer of light, faint but unmistakable. It wasn't red like the Forge's light. It was pure, white, and warm, cutting through the darkness like a beacon. Hope. I reached for it, focusing all my energy on that tiny speck of light. The tendrils faltered, their grip weakening. The core roared, its rage shaking the chamber. "You cannot escape. You are ours." "Not yet," I growled through gritted teeth. With one final surge of strength, I broke free from the tendrils and ran toward the light. The core screamed, its tendrils thrashing wildly, but I didn't stop. The light grew brighter, enveloping me, and for a moment, I felt weightless. Then everything went silent. I opened my eyes to a stark, white emptiness. For a moment, I thought I was dead. The oppressive whispers of the Forge were gone, replaced by a profound silence that was almost as unsettling. But then I noticed the light. It was all around me, soft, warm, and pulsating like a heartbeat. It felt alive, radiating with an energy that was both comforting and overwhelming. The void was no longer dark and consuming but instead brimming with something I hadn't felt in what seemed like an eternity, possibility. I staggered to my feet, my body aching, and turned to see the Forge behind me. It was smaller now, its once massive structure dwarfed by the endless white expanse. The crimson veins no longer pulsed with violent intensity, instead, they flickered weakly, like a dying flame. The Forge wasn't invincible. "You've made a mistake," I whispered, staring into its pulsating core. You showed me your weakness. The silence shattered as the forge roared back to life, its crimson glow surging. Tendrils erupted from its surface, reaching for me, but they faltered when they touched the light surrounding me. The tendrils recoiled, sizzling as if burned. The forge was afraid. The realization hit me like a lightning bolt. This light, this force, was the antithesis of everything the forge represented. It wasn't just hope, it was the raw essence of creation itself. And somehow, I had become its vessel. You cannot destroy us. We are eternal. The voice boomed in my mind, but it wasn't as overwhelming as before. The forge was weakening, and I could feel its desperation. I don't have to destroy you, I said, my voice steady now. I just have to stop you. The light around me surged, responding to my resolve. It wrapped around my hands, forming two blazing weapons, one a blade of pure energy, the other a shield of shimmering light. The forge reacted violently. Its surface split open, revealing a massive, writhing eye at its core. The eye locked onto me, radiating malice and hunger, and the chamber around us began to collapse. Shards of crimson metal rained down as the forge's tendrils lashed out in fury. I charged. The tendrils came at me from every direction, but the shield deflected them effortlessly, each strike sending ripples of light across its surface. I swung the blade, slicing through the tendrils with ease. Each cut sent a burst of light surging into the forge, causing its core to flicker and dim. The ground beneath me shook violently, and I stumbled, barely dodging a massive tendril that smashed into the floor. The forge was unraveling, its structure collapsing under the strain of its own fury. But it wasn't going down without a fight. The tendrils converged, forming a colossal hand that slammed down toward me. I raised the shield, bracing for impact. The force of the blow sent shockwaves through the chamber, but the shield held firm. "I'm not afraid of you," I shouted, pushing back with everything I had. The hand shattered, and I surged forward, the blade in my hand burning brighter than ever. The forge's eye widened, and I could feel its panic. "This cannot be. You are nothing." "No," I said, my voice steady and unwavering. "I'm more than you could ever understand." With one final leap, I drove the blade into the core of the forge. The light exploded outward, consuming everything in its path. The tendrils disintegrated, the crimson glow faded, and the forge let out one last, splitting scream before it imploded. I was thrown backward, the force of the explosion sending me tumbling through the void. For a moment, everything was chaos, a swirling maelstrom of light and energy. Then, just as suddenly as it began, it was over. I woke up on the deck of the Eon Wraith, my body aching but intact. The air smelled of burned circuits and ozone, and the ship's emergency lights flickered weakly. "Captain," a familiar voice called out. I turned to see Dre standing over me, his face pale and his uniform torn. He looked as battered as I felt, but he was alive. "You're back," he said, relief flooding his expression. "What happened?" I asked, struggling to sit up. "You vanished," Dre said. "The forge, whatever it was, it started pulling the ship in. We thought we were done for, but then there was this explosion of light. Next thing we know, you're here, and the forge is gone." I stared out the viewport, where the forge had been. There was nothing left now, just the endless expanse of the void. "It's over," I said, though I wasn't sure I believed it. Dre helped me to my feet, and I looked around the bridge. The crew was battered but alive, and the ship, though damaged, was still holding together. "We need to get out of here," I said, my voice firm. "Set a course back to Coalition space. I don't want to spend another second in this void." As Dre moved to relay the orders, I felt a faint pulse in the back of my mind, a flicker of red that quickly faded. The forge was gone, but its presence lingered, a shadow in the depths of my consciousness. I didn't know what it had done to me or what I had become, but one thing was certain. The forge wasn't just a place. It was an idea, a hunger that could never truly be destroyed. And though I had escaped its grasp, I knew it wasn't the last time I'd face it. As the Eon Wraith slipped into faster-than-light travel, I stared out into the endless stars, clutching the faint glow of light still burning within me. The void was vast and filled with horrors beyond imagination, but I wasn't the same person who had entered it. I had found the Soulforge, and I had survived. For now,